For a long time, people believed humans had simply vanished from Earth. It happened so far in the past that no one alive remembered the real story. All that remained were half-broken buildings, rusted towers, and scattered old writings that hinted at a world once full of human life. Most of the cities had been swallowed by forests or turned into strange new ecosystems created by nature. The remaining species, including animals that had slowly evolved or been uplifted through older technology, grew into their own societies. They made towns, rules, and entire governments inside the ruins of what humans had built. Some lived in the shadows of giant broken towers. Others lived in new settlements far away from old human structures, as if they feared what these ruins still represented. People talked about humans the same way distant cultures talk about ancient gods or legends. Every group had its own version. Some said humans left because they destroyed the planet. Others believed humans had reached a level of power so high that they could not stay on Earth anymore. Some stories even said that humans had fused with machines, becoming something close to immortal. No one knew which version was true. All that everyone agreed on was this: if humans ever returned, nothing on Earth would be able to stop them. In one of the rebuilt cities, a young historian spent most of his life searching old records, hoping to understand what really happened. He loved ancient stories, and he believed the official books didn't tell the whole truth. He would climb into old tunnels, look through dusty metal lockers, and search through broken computers that sometimes still held bits of data. Most of the machines didn't work anymore, but every now and then he managed to recover a small recording or a document. These tiny pieces of information became the foundation for his growing theory. Humans didn't vanish. They left with intention. He shared his findings with the Earth Federation, the largest government created after humans disappeared. At first, the leaders didn't take him seriously. They thought he had simply read too many myths. But everything changed the day he showed them a strange signal he had detected from deep space. It repeated every few hours, steady and calm, like a heartbeat. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. And most importantly, it wasn't similar to any technology used by the species currently living on Earth. When he compared the signal pattern to the old recordings he found in human ruins, something matched. It was the same technology humans used many centuries ago. That discovery shook the entire Federation. The council called an immediate meeting. They gathered in a round chamber made of steel and old stone, trying to understand what this meant. The historian explained his theory again, but this time everyone listened carefully. The room fell silent as he spoke. He showed them how the signal grew stronger every week, as if the source was slowly approaching. He displayed an image of its direction. It wasn't coming from the side of the galaxy most explored by other species. It came from a region no one dared to travel for hundreds of years, a place full of dark energy fields where space never behaved normally. A place humans had once called the frontier. The idea that humans had survived out there, beyond the known galaxy, made the room restless. Leaders whispered among themselves. Some looked frightened. Others seemed fascinated. But most of them didn't know how to react. The historian ended with a simple statement: if humans are returning, we must prepare. Not for war, not for surrender, but for understanding. After that day, everything changed on Earth. Ships were sent to orbit to watch the sky. Scientists began working day and night to decode more parts of the signal. They discovered new layers hidden inside of patterns that seemed like ancient human communication protocols. The Federation quietly created an emergency plan, one not shared with the public. They didn't want panic. People were living normal lives. Farmers harvested crops, children played in the streets, and traders traveled between cities. Nothing in their daily routines suggested a massive event was approaching. But deep inside the government buildings, leaders knew the truth. If humans really were coming back, Earth had no weapons strong enough to resist them. Humans had always been known for rapid growth, advanced thinking, and unpredictable determination. And if they had evolved beyond their original limits, they could be unstoppable. Still, not everyone felt fear. A few believed humans might return as peaceful explorers. Old stories said humans left because Earth was failing, not because they wanted to abandon everything. Many of the uplifting technologies used by modern species came from human innovation. Even now, some of the most powerful machines on Earth were only partially understood because humans built them. That meant humans were not just powerful. They were far ahead. Weeks passed, and the signal grew more precise. Observatories detected strange distortions in distant star fields, as if something massive was moving through space. The historian felt a strange mix of excitement and worry. He spent every hour watching the signal readings, hoping to find clues about why humans were coming back now. One night, something new happened. The signal stopped repeating. Instead, a final pulse hit every scanner on Earth. It was stronger than anything recorded before, so powerful that even low-level communication devices reacted to it. The scientist monitoring the main console almost dropped his tools when he saw the numbers rising to impossible levels. Then, the next morning, the world woke up to the sight of massive dark shapes appearing in orbit. They were not like any known spacecraft. They were too large, too quiet, and their surfaces didn't reflect light the way normal metal did. They looked like shadows carved into the sky. People went outside and stared upward. Fear spread across cities. Messages poured into the Federation headquarters. Everyone asked the same question. What are those things? The historian knew the answer the moment he saw them. They were not alien ships. They were human vessels built using technology far beyond anything Earth had seen. The Federation sent a message to the ships, using old human signals. No one expected a reply, but everyone hoped for one. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Finally, the Council decided to send an ambassadorial vessel to approach one of the giant structures. The small ship flew upward, nervous silence filling the control room on the ground. As soon as the ambassador's ship got close, every screen flickered. The ship wasn't destroyed, attacked, or pushed away. Instead, it simply stopped, suspended in space, completely unharmed. The humans seemed to pause it as easily as a parent stopping a child from stepping into danger. Then a single message echoed across every communication channel on Earth. It was calm, steady, and unmistakably human. We are returning to our home. People froze where they stood. Families listening to radios dropped their food in shock. Traders halted their vehicles. Entire streets fell quiet. The world had feared this moment for centuries, and now it had arrived. The historian listened to the message over and over again. He noted something strange in the voice. Not anger, not pride. It sounded almost gentle, like someone speaking to familiar land they hadn't seen in a very long time. Leaders across the planet held secret meetings again. They debated possible responses. Some wanted to welcome humans peacefully. Others were terrified of the power they seemed to carry. Old stories described humans as destructive and unpredictable. But another message arrived soon after, one that only the Federation decoded. It contained a symbol seen only once before engraved inside a hidden room under an ancient human laboratory. It was the insignia of Project Ascendancy. The historian had spent years researching that project. It was the final human program carried out before their disappearance. Many theories surrounded it. Some believed it was about deep space survival. Others thought it involved massive self-evolution. Whatever it was, the project had changed humans forever. The Federation kept this new information hidden from the public. They didn't want panic. But inside their chambers, fear grew. If these returning humans were part of Project Ascendancy, They were not the same species that had left Earth. More weeks passed, and the dark ships remained silent in orbit. They didn't attack. They didn't move. They simply watched. And Earth watched them back. Everywhere, people whispered about the legends. They remembered that humans had once built cities that touched the clouds. They remembered stories saying humans learned to control energy itself. Some wondered if the legends were true, and if these new humans, whoever they had become, could reshape the world. Meanwhile, deep underground, in an old research facility long forgotten, a group of scientists discovered more locked files from Project Ascendancy. They spent long days decoding the data, trying to understand what humans had become. And the more they learned, the more nervous they became. The final line in the recovered document sent chills across every scientist in the room. They will return when the world can no longer protect itself. No one knew what that meant. No one knew what danger the planet might face. And no one understood why humans had chosen this moment to come back. But the world knew one thing for sure. The real story was just beginning. The dark shapes in orbit didn't move for days. People on Earth could only watch and wait. Satellites tried to scan them, but every instrument failed. Signals bounced back, as if the ships were made of something that didn't belong to the normal world. The Earth Federation gathered its best scientists, engineers, and military advisors. Every theory they had failed to explain what these ships were or what they could do. It wasn't just technology that made them dangerous. It was something deeper, something humans had never seen before. Citizens looked up in fear and awe. Children pointed at the sky, laughing nervously, while their parents whispered worries about what was coming. Farmers left fields half-harvested. Traders paused their deliveries, and even the most distant settlements took notice. News broadcasts tried to calm people, but every anchor's voice trembled slightly. No one had seen anything like this before. Inside the Federation's command center, alarms occasionally went off. But they weren't caused by external threats. They came from their own machines, confused by the energy fields around the ships. Scientists ran calculations, recalculated, and ran them again. Nothing worked. Every measurement came back as if the ships existed in a reality, slightly different from the rest of the world. Then, unexpectedly, a small glowing portal opened inside one of the orbiting ships. No one understood how it worked. It didn't follow any physics they knew. Out of it, a single human figure emerged. They were tall, more so than any human had ever been. Their skin seemed to shimmer faintly, reflecting the light of the sun in strange patterns. Their eyes were calm, almost gentle, but their presence radiated power so strong it made instruments shake and computers fail. The Earth Federation scrambled a small delegation to meet this being. They prepared carefully, hoping for a peaceful first contact. Military personnel were on standby, but they were hesitant to act. Even their weapons seemed ineffective. When the delegation's ship approached, the returning human raised a hand. A soft, almost invisible force stopped the ship before it could get closer. No one was hurt, but every person inside felt a strange pressure, as if reality itself was urging them to pause. A calm voice echoed in everyone's minds. It was not loud, not demanding. It was simply there, clear and patient. Do not be afraid. We have returned to our home. We do not wish to harm. The words spread quickly, even through communication channels. People everywhere felt a strange mix of relief and fear. For centuries, humans had been legends, stories told to children to scare them or inspire them. Now they were real, and they were more powerful than anyone had imagined. On the ground, the historian who had first detected the signals was called to the Federation's council. His excitement was mixed with fear. He had always dreamed of seeing humans again, but now that they were here, the reality was overwhelming. The council wanted him to explain what Project Ascendancy was. He tried to simplify the information as best he could. Project Ascendancy was humanity's final step before leaving Earth, he explained. It was a program meant to prepare humans for survival in the stars. But it didn't just protect them, it transformed them. Their bodies, their minds, even their connection to energy itself were enhanced. They became something beyond ordinary humans. The council members listened, some in awe, some in terror. One advisor whispered, "We're not ready for this. Nothing on Earth is." Another added, "If they wanted to take over, we couldn't stop them. We have to hope they are peaceful." Days passed, and more humans appeared from the ships. Each one was unique, but all shared the same calm, almost gentle aura of strength. They moved in silence, floating slightly above the ground when they descended to meet the delegation. Their presence didn't cause fear in the way a predator would. It was deeper, more profound. People instinctively knew these humans were capable of almost anything. Yet they were not cruel. The returning humans wanted to learn about the current state of Earth. They asked simple questions about cities, food, water, and governance. They were curious about how life had continued without them. Some scientists tried to explain, showing maps, statistics, and reports. But the humans didn't seem impressed or surprised. They listened patiently, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking more questions, but always with the same calm expression. At first, the military remained tense. They deployed forces near the landing sites, unsure if the humans could be trusted. But every attempt to provoke them failed. Weapons didn't fire properly. Vehicles refused to start. Even communication devices misfired when aimed at the returning humans. It became clear, if humans wanted to, they could destroy every city on Earth without effort. Yet they did nothing. People started to talk in whispers about the truth of humanity. Stories that once seemed like myths were suddenly real. Humans weren't just returning as people, they had become something else. Some said they were like gods, but gentler, wiser, and aware of life in a way no one else could understand. Others were afraid, believing that such power, even used kindly, could eventually overwhelm the world. The historian continued his work, documenting every encounter. He traveled with the delegation to the landing sites, speaking to the returning humans, learning about their knowledge of space, energy, and life itself. He realized that humans had not only survived, they had evolved. They had learned to merge technology with biology in ways that made them faster, stronger, and smarter. They had learned to control energy, even on a planetary scale. Despite this incredible power, the humans were careful. They avoided unnecessary displays of strength. When a small crowd of curious people approached, they simply smiled and waved, not trying to impress or frighten anyone. It was almost as if they understood that fear could harm more than any weapon. The Federation held emergency sessions to discuss next steps. Some members wanted to establish a treaty, ensuring the humans would not interfere in Earth's governments. Others argued for strict observation in preparation for potential conflict. But the more leaders watched the humans, the more impossible it seemed to resist them. Meanwhile, life on the ground continued. Children played under the shadows of the massive ships above. Farmers went back to their fields, slowly regaining courage. Traders resumed their journeys, whispering stories of the humans they had seen. Everywhere, people began to feel a strange hope. The humans had returned not as conquerors, but as observers, teachers, and protectors. One day, a young scientist approached the historian. "Do you think they understand us?" she asked. "I think they understand more than we realize," he replied. "Not just our words, but our fears, hopes, and dreams. They know the weight of being human, and they know what it means to come home." The humans began to explore parts of Earth carefully. They didn't rush, and they didn't interfere with daily life. They studied old ruins, observing and recording, sometimes leaving tiny gifts, small devices that could purify water, heal minor injuries, or help crops grow faster. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it reminded people that these returning humans were not here to dominate. Still, questions remained. Why now? Why return after centuries? The historian discovered that the humans' mission was deeply tied to Earth's health. Long ago, humans had seen that the planet could not survive forever without guidance. Their journey into space wasn't only for survival, it was for knowledge. They had learned how to fix what was broken, how to restore ecosystems, and how to prevent disasters. And now they had returned to apply what they had learned. Even as the humans shared their knowledge, some people remained wary. Stories of their power and past projects spread quickly. Fear was natural, but so was curiosity. And that curiosity drove more people to visit the landing sites, to observe quietly, to see what these humans were like. By the end of the first month, humanity on Earth had reached a strange equilibrium. People watched the sky, but they also continued their lives. The returning humans moved slowly, carefully, almost as if they were learning about a home that had changed without them. And the world, for the first time in centuries, felt like it was on the edge of something new, not dangerous, but incredible. The historian wrote in his journal, "They are not the humans we remember from stories. They are more. And yet they are still us. They came back not to conquer, not to punish, but to heal. And maybe, just maybe, we are ready to see what it truly means to be human." Every night, the dark ships remained in orbit, silent, watching. People slept under their shadows, dreaming of a future they could barely imagine. And in the hearts of everyone who had seen them, a quiet thought lingered. Humans had returned, and nothing would ever be the same again. The world was watching. Every corner of Earth felt the presence of the returning humans. Their massive ships hovered silently in orbit, their energy radiating in ways that no scanner could measure. On the ground, people moved carefully, aware that they were no longer alone on their planet. Yet despite the overwhelming power these humans displayed, they made no aggressive moves. Their calm patience unsettled some and inspired others. Inside the Earth Federation, meetings grew more urgent. Leaders argued over the safest way to approach the newcomers. Some believed a peaceful approach would work. Others warned that humans could not be fully trusted. "We don't know their full intentions," one commander said. "If they wanted to, they could erase all life on Earth in an instant." Yet, at the same time, scientists reported no signs of hostility. Not a single weapon or energy field had been used against humans' instructions. The people on the ground slowly realized that, despite their terrifying capabilities, the returning humans had chosen restraint. The historian, who had spent years uncovering humanity's past, was called to help interpret new findings. In secret archives, he found old documents describing a program called Project Ascendancy. The project had been humanity's final step before leaving Earth, a plan designed to prepare humans for survival in the stars. But the project had changed them more than anyone had imagined. Humans had merged technology with biology, learning to control energy, life, and even space in ways that made them stronger and smarter than before. Project Ascendancy wasn't just survival, he explained to a council meeting. It was evolution beyond Earth. They didn't just leave, they became something more than human. Something beyond our understanding. This revelation unsettled the council. If these returning humans were indeed the result of Project Ascendancy, Earth had no means to oppose them. All weapons, all defenses would fail. But despite that, they had not attacked. That restraint puzzled everyone. Were they testing the planet? Observing its people? Or simply waiting for something? Meanwhile, across the planet, ordinary people tried to continue their lives. Children played beneath the shadows of orbiting ships. Farmers returned to their fields. cautiously hopeful that the humans meant no harm. Traders resumed their journeys between cities, whispering stories of what they had seen. People who had lived their whole lives believing humans were myths now saw them as real and overwhelmingly powerful. One day, a human descended from the largest ship, moving with ease and grace. Their presence was calm, but it carried weight, a kind of energy that made the air itself seem alive. The historian and a small delegation approached, careful not to provoke fear. The human spoke softly, almost as if speaking directly to each of their hearts. We wish to understand this world. We have returned not to conquer, but to learn. Tell us about your lives, your struggles, your hopes. The historian stepped forward, feeling a mix of fear and awe. We have survived, he said. We rebuilt cities, we learned from mistakes, and we tried to keep the planet alive. But we are not as strong as you. Your return is overwhelming. The human's eyes softened. Strength alone does not define us, they said. It is the choices we make and how we treat life that matters. That is why we do not use our power to dominate. The historian was struck by the simplicity of the words. It seemed almost impossible that beings of such power could choose to act with patience and care. Yet, every action they took reinforced this truth. They observed without interference, helped subtly when they could, and never forced anyone to act against their will. Federation scientists were given permission to study these humans, to understand their abilities and knowledge. They were cautious, knowing that a single misstep could be disastrous. The humans shared information willingly, but not everything. They revealed knowledge about energy, space travel, and biology that was almost impossible to comprehend. Every lesson hinted at a world beyond what people thought was possible, a universe where humans had learned to bend life itself to sustain it. As more humans arrived, the population of Earth grew curious and cautious. Crowds gathered near landing sites, observing quietly. Children stared in awe at humans, who seemed to move almost without effort. Farmers and builders watched as humans repaired broken structures with subtle gestures, touching walls and machinery that immediately hummed to life. It was not magic, but advanced science that appeared magical to ordinary eyes. Even as awe spread across the population, fear lingered. Stories from the past spoke of humans as unpredictable and dangerous. Some people whispered that the returning humans might eventually claim Earth for themselves, despite their calm words and actions. Others argued that fear was natural, but respect and curiosity were stronger. People began to realize that the human's power was not meant to intimidate, it was meant to teach, guide, and protect, deep in a forgotten research facility. The historian and a group of scientists uncovered more documents from Project Ascendancy. They detailed experiments in which humans had enhanced their minds and bodies to survive the harsh conditions of space. They had learned to harness energy directly from stars, manipulate matter on a small scale, and even heal themselves in ways that seemed impossible. These humans were no longer just people. They had become guardians of knowledge and life. Yet, despite all their power, the returning humans were careful. They avoided interference in daily life, choosing instead to observe, record, and learn. They moved quietly through cities, repairing damaged infrastructure, purifying water, and helping crops grow without demanding recognition. People began to see them not as gods, but as allies, guardians who had returned to help a world they once called home. Military leaders remained uneasy. They continued to train, plan, and prepare for the worst, knowing that humans could not be stopped if they wanted to be. But the returning humans never showed hostility. Every encounter confirmed their patience and wisdom. Even when a small group of citizens approached too closely to one of the landing sites, the humans responded not with force, but with a subtle barrier that gently redirected them, leaving them unharmed but aware of the humans' power. The historian recorded everything. Every interaction, every lesson, every subtle act of guidance was written down. He knew that history would remember this moment as a turning point, a moment when humans returned not to rule, but to teach, to guide, and to restore. One evening, the historian sat on a hill overlooking a rebuilt city. The sun set behind the orbiting ships, casting long shadows across the landscape. People went about their evening routines, cautiously optimistic. Traders closed their shops, children played quietly, and families prepared for dinner. All around, there was a sense of anticipation, a quiet feeling that something incredible was unfolding. The historian thought about the human's words. Strength alone does not define us. It is the choices we make and how we treat life that matters. He realized that this truth was at the heart of Project Descendancy. Humans had returned not to dominate, but to restore balance. They had learned that true power was measured not by destruction, but by the ability to protect, to heal, and to guide Dot as night fell. The human ships remained in orbit, silent and calm. People slept under their shadows, dreaming of a future they could barely imagine. Yet the sense of hope was stronger than fear. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, not as gods, but as guardians. And the world, for the first time in centuries, began to believe that a new chapter was possible. The historian wrote in his journal, "They are not the humans we once knew. They are stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. They have returned not to rule, but to guide. And in their presence, we are learning what it truly means to be human." As the stars shone above, Earth waited. The returning humans continued to watch, learn, and help quietly. And every person who had glimpsed them knew one thing. Life on Earth would never be the same again. The world was no longer alone. Humans had returned, and with them came knowledge, power, and hope. The story was far from over, but for the first time in centuries, people dared to dream that the future might be brighter than the past. The day the first humans touched the ground was one no one would ever forget. From the moment they descended from their enormous ships, their presence changed the atmosphere. People didn't just feel awe, they felt something deeper, almost like the air itself had become heavier with possibility. The humans moved slowly, deliberately, each step measured, as though they were learning about a home they had not seen in centuries. Crowds gathered at a safe distance, watching in silence. No one dared approach too closely. Farmers left their fields, traders paused on dusty roads, and children hid behind parents' legs, peeking through fingers. The Earth Federation had cleared the area, allowing only a small delegation to meet the newcomers. Scientists, historians, and a few chosen officials stepped forward. Every person felt a mixture of excitement and fear, aware that the beings in front of them were more powerful than anything Earth had ever known. The humans did not speak at first. They looked around, their eyes scanning cities, forests, and mountains with quiet interest. Their movements were calm, but precise, almost like they could sense the past and future of every structure, every tree, every living being. Even the simplest gesture, a hand brushing over a broken wall, caused old bricks to shimmer and settle, as if remembering the strength they once had. People whispered among themselves, realizing that these humans were capable of shaping the world without lifting heavy machinery or using any tools. When the humans finally spoke, their voices were soft but clear, echoing in the minds of everyone present. "We have returned to see what has become of our home," one said. "We come to learn, to understand, and to help. We do not seek conflict." For a moment, the historian almost forgot to breathe. He had studied these beings for years, read countless documents, and tried to imagine their power. Yet now, standing face to face, he realized that nothing he had read could fully prepare him for the reality. The human's presence was calm, yet overwhelming. Their power was visible not in violence, but in the quiet way they existed. A delegation stepped forward cautiously. Scientists presented data showing how Earth had changed in their absence. They explained rebuilt cities, new ecosystems, and the ways the surviving species had learned to thrive. The humans listened carefully, nodding, occasionally asking questions. Their curiosity was patient, thoughtful, and almost childlike in its simplicity. Despite their obvious strength, some military advisors were nervous. They had hoped to maintain control, but they quickly realized that any attempt at confrontation would be futile. Weapons failed when aimed at the humans. Vehicles refused to start when they tried to block them. Even communication devices faltered. The humans did not act aggressively, yet their very presence rendered Earth's defenses powerless. That realization caused a mixture of fear and respect in everyone present. The humans wanted to understand life as it existed now, not as it had once been. They asked about food, water, and energy sources. They asked about how societies governed themselves, how people solved disputes, and how species coexisted. Scientists explained carefully, using maps, models, and small demonstrations. The humans observed, learning quickly, absorbing every detail. Yet they never judged or criticized. They were not visitors looking to control. They were observers, trying to understand the world they had once called home. The historian noticed something extraordinary. These humans, despite their immense power, seemed to remember the fragility of life. They treated animals with care, helped plants grow with subtle gestures, and avoided disturbing natural habitats. Even broken machinery, when touched, repaired itself without harming anyone. People began to realize that these beings were not just humans. They were guardians. Their evolution had given them strength, but their choices revealed wisdom, patience, and compassion. Despite this calm, fear lingered among some. Rumors spread quickly. What if humans decided they no longer needed the species that had survived in their absence? What if their curiosity turned judgment? Some citizens whispered that humans could erase the world in a heartbeat. Others, however, were inspired, believing that the returning humans had come to restore Earth, not destroy it. The historian spoke quietly to a scientist beside him. "They could destroy us in an instant," he said. "Yet they choose not to. That's the difference. Power alone doesn't define them. Their choices do." Even as humans explored, subtle acts of guidance began to appear. In one village, children noticed that crops were healthier than ever. In another, broken bridges repaired themselves overnight, without explanation. Farmers found water sources purified. Scientists found new ways to harness energy, inspired by the humans' subtle demonstrations. It was not magic, it was advanced knowledge, shared in ways that respected the humans' understanding and the humans' patience. Military leaders tried to understand the humans' motives. They observed every movement, every interaction, every gesture. It became clear that humans were testing, learning, and evaluating, but they were not preparing to fight. The historian realized that their presence was a form of teaching. They were showing, not telling, how to rebuild, restore, and thrive without imposing control. The first few weeks were tense. People watched from afar, unsure of how to react. Slowly, though, curiosity began to replace fear. Communities sent representatives to observe. Scientists recorded every interaction, and children learned to watch without being scared. The humans did not rush. They took their time, exploring ruins, forests, cities, and rivers with patience. Every place they visited seemed to respond. Water flowed clearer, plants grew stronger, and old structures seemed to regain part of their former strength. One day, the historian followed a human into an abandoned city center. Broken buildings leaned precariously, streets were cracked, and nature had begun reclaiming the land. The human moved slowly, touching walls, floors, and even small machines. As they did, subtle changes occurred. Metal straightened, bricks settled, and small devices powered up without electricity. Yet at no point did the human disrupt the city violently. It was as if they were gently reminding the city of its former strength. People gathered nearby, witnessing the transformation. Fear mixed with awe. They began to whisper. These humans had returned not to rule, not to dominate, but to restore what had been lost. It was not power alone that made them extraordinary. It was the way they used it, with care and responsibility, that the historian realized something important. These humans were not trying to prove their superiority. They were teaching humanity, both the returning humans and those who had survived, what it truly meant to use power wisely. Every action, every gesture, every demonstration was part of a lesson in patience, responsibility, and respect for life. As the days passed, more humans descended to the ground. Some came in pairs, others alone, but all acted with the same deliberate calm. Crowds watched from a distance, gradually realizing that these humans were not enemies. The children who once hid now pointed and waved. Farmers returned to their work with renewed hope. Traders moved again, speaking excitedly about the subtle miracles they had seen. The Federation remained cautious. Military plans were prepared, but never executed. Every attempt to force an interaction failed harmlessly. The humans were always one step ahead, not in aggression, but in understanding. They could sense fear, curiosity, and doubt. They responded not with violence, but with subtle corrections, guiding people gently and showing them the best path forward. The historian wrote in his journal, "These humans are not just our ancestors. They are teachers. Their power is immense, but it is their choice to act with care that defines them. They have returned not to conquer, but to guide. And in their presence, the world begins to remember what it once was and what it could be again." By the end of the first month, the humans had traveled through multiple cities, forests, and settlements. Everywhere they went, small but significant changes appeared. Broken infrastructure improved, water sources became purer, and small devices that had long been forgotten began to work again. People began to believe that Earth itself was awakening, not because of humans' power, but because of the humans' wisdom. Every night, the massive ships remained in orbit, silent and watchful. The world slept beneath their shadows, dreaming of possibilities they had never imagined. And the historian, watching from a hilltop, realized that the true challenge was not fear of the humans, but learning to live alongside them, understanding their lessons, and preparing for the next stage of humanity's return. The world was changing, slowly and carefully. People began to understand that the returning humans were not threats. They were not conquerors. They were guides. And for the first time in centuries, Earth's inhabitants dared to hope for a future where humans and the world could thrive together. The historian closed his journal and looked up at the ships. The night sky was filled with stars, but the largest stars were the humans themselves, hovering silently, watching, waiting, and teaching. And everyone who had seen them knew one thing with certainty: life on Earth would never be the same again. The humans who had returned to Earth continued their careful exploration. Every city they visited, every village they passed through, every forest they walked into seemed to respond to their presence. Crops grew taller and healthier, rivers ran clearer, and even old machines started working again, powered by technologies people didn't understand. Yet they never forced anything, never demanded obedience, and never showed aggression. Their actions were deliberate and gentle, yet they carried a power so immense that even the most skeptical people could not deny it. The Earth Federation continued to monitor their activities closely. Military leaders, scientists, and political officials gathered daily to discuss what to do next. Some argued for caution, others for diplomacy. One thing was certain: if these humans ever chose to act aggressively, no weapon on Earth could stop them. Every plan the military had prepared quickly became useless, as soon as the humans arrived in a new area. Ships refused to start, communications jammed, and energy fields collapsed. It was clear that their abilities went far beyond normal understanding. Yet despite this overwhelming power, the humans showed patience. They did not demand control or obedience. Instead, they asked questions, observed, and guided. They wanted to understand how life had continued without them. They asked about the surviving species, the rebuilt cities, and the daily lives of humans who had stayed behind. They even asked about the challenges people faced, the struggles of governance, of food production, of balancing human needs with nature. The historian spent hours with them, explaining what had happened in their absence. "We rebuilt," he said, "but not as we were. We adapted. We learned new ways to survive. Some of us turned to science, others to farming, others to politics. We are not the humans who left. We are the humans who stayed." The returning humans listened carefully, their expressions calm and thoughtful. Occasionally, one would place a hand on a structure, a river, or a tree, and the historian would notice subtle changes. A wall straightened, water flowed more clearly, plants grew faster. Nothing was destroyed. Everything improved. It was almost impossible to explain, yet it became clear to the historian that their power was not meant for domination. They were teaching, guiding, and restoring. Despite this calm presence, fear lingered among some. Rumors spread that humans could dominate or erase entire cities in a heartbeat. Some factions within the Federation debated secretly, trying to figure out a way to resist or fight back. They looked through old archives, searching for technologies that could match or counteract the humans' power. But nothing worked. Every attempt to manipulate or harm the returning humans failed. Vehicles stopped, weapons misfired, and communication devices refused to function near them. The humans seemed to anticipate fear. When a group of military drones tried to follow them, the drones simply froze mid-air, unable to continue. No one was harmed, and the drones were eventually returned intact. It was a clear demonstration of power, yet done without aggression. People began to understand that these humans had mastered control not through fear, but through restraint. Across the planet, ordinary people began to see changes in their own lives. Farmers found water purer than it had been in decades. Children found plants growing faster in school gardens. Broken machines in towns suddenly worked again, seemingly on their own. People whispered about the humans they had seen, sharing stories about how they repaired and healed without ever forcing their will. These small acts inspired hope as well as curiosity. In communities everywhere, not one day, the humans arrived at a city that had been partially abandoned for centuries. The buildings were crumbling, streets cracked, and vegetation had begun to reclaim the area. People gathered from surrounding towns, unsure what to expect. As the humans moved through the city, they touched walls, floors, and small machines. Each touch caused subtle but significant changes. Walls strengthened, small machines powered on, and water fountains began to flow. The city seemed to awaken under their presence. People watched in amazement. Children laughed and ran along streets that suddenly seemed safer. Adults whispered among themselves, realizing that the humans had no intention of harming anyone, yet their power was undeniable. For the first time in centuries, the world felt alive in a way it had not since the humans left. The historian followed closely, noting every detail. He realized that the humans were not just restoring cities, they were teaching people how to care for their own world. Their actions were lessons, showing what was possible when power was used responsibly. "They are not here to rule," he said to a scientist beside him. "They are here to show us how to live better, how to restore balance." Even as hope spread, tension remained. Some people could not accept that beings so powerful could act without seeking control. They feared that, at any moment, humans might turn their power into dominance. Secret meetings were held, with plans to resist if necessary. Yet every plan failed, as if the humans could sense fear and doubt, neutralizing threats without confrontation. The humans themselves seemed aware of this tension. They approached skeptics gently, answering questions, showing how their powers could help without harming anyone. When a group of city leaders expressed fear of losing control, the humans simply demonstrated by repairing a broken bridge or purifying a water source, showing that strength could be used for benefit, not domination. Slowly, even the most fearful began to understand. Across Earth, life began to change in quiet, subtle ways. Cities became cleaner and safer. Crops grew more abundantly. Water sources remained pure. And people began to trust that these humans had returned to guide, not conquer. The historian noted how hope, once scarce, was growing alongside the humans' quiet influence. Communities worked together more effectively. Inspired by the example of restraint and responsibility, they witnessed that the returning humans also began to reveal some of their knowledge. They showed scientists advanced methods for purifying water, repairing buildings, and restoring soil fertility. They shared ideas for sustainable energy that required no destruction of the environment. These lessons were small, carefully measured, but they had profound effects. Entire regions began to recover from decades of neglect and hardship. At the same time, the humans continued their observation. They did not impose their will, but studied how life had adapted during their absence. They asked questions, noted patterns, and occasionally demonstrated improvements in ways that were subtle but transformative. Every interaction, every gesture, became a lesson for the people who watched. The historian wrote in his journal, "They have returned not to dominate, but to teach. Their strength is unmatched, yet their patience is greater. They do not force the world to bend to them. Instead, they guide, repair, and restore. Every act is a lesson in what power truly means." Even military leaders began to change their perspective. They realized that resistance was impossible, yet confrontation was unnecessary. The humans' restraint and guidance made them allies rather than threats. Slowly, the world learned that the greatest power was not in destruction, but in careful, deliberate action guided by wisdom. By the end of the month, the humans had traveled to every major city, observing and improving quietly. Broken infrastructure was restored. Crops grew stronger. Rivers and lakes became cleaner. People began to understand that the humans' goal was not to rule, but to restore balance, to help humanity live in harmony with the planet. The historian stood on a hill overlooking a restored city. Children played in the streets. Adults worked together with renewed energy. Nature seemed to thrive alongside human life. The humans who had returned watched silently from a distance, guiding without interference, teaching without force. He wrote in his journal, "They are not the humans we once knew. They are stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. They have returned not to rule, but to guide. And in their presence, the world is learning what it truly means to survive, to thrive, and to care for life itself." As night fell, the ships remained in orbit, silent and watchful. People slept under their shadows, dreaming of possibilities they had never imagined. And everyone who had witnessed their presence understood that life on Earth would never be the same again. The returning humans had not come to conquer. They had come to restore, to teach, and to guide. And in their quiet, deliberate way, they were changing the world forever. The months had passed quickly, though for many people it felt like time had slowed. Life on Earth was changing in ways no one had imagined. Cities that had once been crumbling were now strong, clean, and efficient. Rivers ran clear, forests grew thicker, and crops yielded more than ever before. People moved differently, more carefully, more thoughtfully, as if the very presence of the returning humans had reminded them of what mattered. The humans themselves had settled into a quiet rhythm. They did not interfere directly with daily life, but their presence was everywhere. In every city, town, and village, they could be seen observing, touching, or repairing in ways so subtle that most people barely noticed. A broken water pump would start working again. A fallen tree would be returned upright. A street lamp that had been dead for years would flicker to life. It was not magic, it was advanced knowledge, a power that could have destroyed everything if misused, but that they used with restraint and care. The historian continued his work, documenting every event. He traveled with the humans to remote locations, showing them how life had survived and evolved. He was careful not to interfere with their methods, knowing that every lesson they gave was meant to teach humanity, not just to repair what was broken. Through his notes, he realized the returning humans were doing more than restoring Earth. They were teaching the world how to understand balance, responsibility, and the power to care. People began to change. Farmers worked more efficiently, guided by subtle advice from the humans. Teachers began to approach their students differently, inspired by the humans' patience and wisdom. Leaders in cities began to think about long-term solutions rather than short-term power struggles. Everywhere, people were learning the meaning of responsibility, not because they were forced, but because the humans showed them by example. That the Federation continued to observe with caution. Some members still feared the power these humans held. They had the ability to erase cities, control the elements, or bend technology to their will. Yet every day they witnessed restraint, guidance, and understanding. Slowly, they began to realize that true power was not in dominance, it was in restraint, wisdom, and the careful use of abilities for the benefit of life itself. One day, the historian traveled with a group of humans to an ancient city that had been abandoned for centuries. The streets were cracked, buildings were half collapsed, and nature had begun reclaiming the area. The humans walked slowly through the city, touching walls, machinery, and the earth itself. With each touch, subtle changes occurred. Broken walls became solid, rusted machinery moved again, and water began flowing through old channels. But no one was forced to act, no one was harmed, and everything improved naturally. People from surrounding towns gathered to watch. Children laughed and ran through the streets. Adults whispered in amazement, and even skeptics could not deny the improvements. The historian realized that the humans were teaching the world how to care for itself. Their actions were lessons in responsibility, patience, and respect for life. The humans also began to share knowledge in ways people could understand. They showed advanced methods for purifying water, growing crops efficiently, and repairing infrastructure without harming the environment. They demonstrated ways to use energy wisely, to build stronger and safer structures, and to protect natural habitats. The lessons were subtle, but their impact was immense. Slowly, communities began to adopt these new methods, improving life for everyone without feeling forced or controlled. Even as hope spread, fear lingered in some hearts. Stories of the humans' past power persisted, and a few people worried that such strength could turn dangerous at any moment. Secret meetings were held, planning how to resist or defend if necessary. But every attempt to manipulate, confront, or challenge the returning humans failed harmlessly. Vehicles stopped working near them, weapons misfired, and communication systems glitched. It became clear that the humans were aware of fear, but did not respond with violence. They guided, not controlled. They corrected, not punished. The historian noted that this was the most important lesson of all. Power was meaningless without wisdom and compassion. The returning humans had mastered both, and in doing so, they were teaching the world not just how to survive, but how to thrive. People began to understand that restraint was strength, patience was power, and responsibility was the greatest form of influence. Across the planet, Small communities began to take initiative. Villages repaired themselves, cities maintained clean water and energy, and forests and rivers were protected more carefully than before. People had learned to work together, inspired by the humans' presence. Cooperation replaced fear, hope replaced doubt, and the world slowly began to recover from centuries of neglect and hardship. The humans themselves continued their quiet guidance. They moved carefully, touched lightly, and acted with patience. Their presence alone encouraged people to do better, think better, and care more. They never demanded obedience, never asked for recognition, and never interfered directly with governance or daily life. Their influence was indirect, but profound. One evening, the historian stood on a hill overlooking a restored city. Children played in streets that had once been abandoned. Farmers worked in fields that had long been infertile. Rivers and lakes gleamed under the sunset. The humans watched from a distance, guiding silently, observing carefully. It was a scene unlike anything the world had seen for centuries. He wrote in his journal, "They have returned not to conquer, not to rule, but to guide. Their strength is immense, yet they use it with care. Their presence teaches patience, wisdom, and responsibility. In their example, we are learning what it truly means to live, to protect, and to thrive." As the night fell, the orbiting ships glimmered against the stars. People slept beneath their shadows, dreaming of possibilities they had never imagined. The world was alive in a way it hadn't been for centuries. Humans had returned not as conquerors, but as teachers and guides. The historian thought about what the future might hold. The humans had arrived not to impose their will, but to restore balance. They had returned not only to help humanity survive, but to show that power meant nothing without responsibility, and strength was only true when used to protect life. Across the world, cities, towns, and villages reflected this change. People moved with care, spoke with understanding, and worked with purpose. The small, subtle lessons of the returning humans had grown into a movement. Communities learned to think ahead, to value cooperation, and to cherish the planet itself. The humans continued their exploration, visiting forests, mountains, deserts, and oceans. They repaired what was broken, studied what had grown, and guided life quietly and carefully. Their actions showed that power could be used for good. That strength was meaningful only when balanced with compassion, and that the greatest achievement was not control, but harmony. The historian watched one human carefully help a river regain its flow. Mud and rocks were shifted, fallen trees adjusted, and within hours, the water ran clear and steady. Fish returned, plants grew along the banks, and the river became healthy once more. The human did not force the world to change. They guided it, nudged it, and allowed it to respond naturally. It became clear to everyone that the humans' return was not just about restoring the past, it was about creating a better future. People had learned to live cautiously, but also courageously. Communities had discovered cooperation and patience. Nature had begun to thrive alongside humanity. And the humans, though quiet and gentle, remained a constant reminder of what could be achieved when power was used wisely. By the end of the year, the world had changed dramatically. Cities, forests, rivers, and mountains were stronger and healthier. Humanity had grown wiser, more patient, and more cooperative. The humans who had returned had taught not through force, but through example. Every gesture, every action, every careful demonstration had left an imprint on the people of Earth. The historian wrote the final words in his journal. "They are not the humans we once knew. They are stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. They have returned to guide, not conquer. In their presence, the world has learned patience, responsibility, and care. Life on Earth will never be the same again." And for the first time in centuries, we see hope not as a dream, but as reality. The humans remained in orbit, silent and watchful, occasionally descending to guide or teach. They had returned home, and in doing so, had restored hope to a world that had long forgotten it. People slept beneath the stars, dreaming of a future filled with possibility, and knew that, with the guidance of those who had returned, they could thrive beyond what they had ever imagined. Earth had changed, and humanity had changed with it. The legend of the returning humans was no longer a story, it was a living reality. And for the first time in centuries, the world felt complete.